Well, would you look at that? It's me again. Bet you didn't expect that. Anyways, we're reading The Husky and His White Cat, Shizun, by Ru Bao Buchi-ru, Book 1, Chapter 5. This venerable one isn't a thief. Loyalty Hall was brightly lit. Shimei had taken his leave of them a while back, so it was just Mo-ran and Zhumeng. Mo-ran followed Zhumeng into the hall, and upon seeing the scene within, his confusion immediately cleared. So it was Rongju, that pansy. He'd actually had the nerve to come to Xisheng Peak to complain about the money Mo-ran had stolen from him. Rongju was currently sobbing into the embrace of a big, burly man, the picture of a weeping beauty. At Mo-ran and Zhumeng's entrance, his sobs grew 3 pitches higher, as if he might foam at the mouth and swoon if it not for the man's arms around him. A dainty lady sat on the hall's dais behind a bead curtain, clearly at a complete loss. Mo-ran didn't spare the repulsive pair so much as a glance, as he instead greeted her. "Aunt, I'm back." This woman was the lady of Xisheng Peak, Madame Wang. Unlike those heroines who were every bit a match for their male counterparts, she was a meek homemaker who didn't dabble in matters outside the sect. She had absolutely no idea how to deal with this without her husband around. "Aran," she said timidly, "you finally returned." Mo-ran only smiled at her, acting as if the complainant duo weren't even there. "It's so late, yet you're still up, Aunt. Did you need me for something?" You see, this Rongongzi says that you took his money." Madame Wang had a rather thin face and was thus too embarrassed to say that Mo-ran had gone whoring. Instead, she chose to address the minor offense. Mo-ran's eyes curved as he smiled. "Really? It's not like I'm short on money. Why would I need to take theirs? Besides, I don't recognize either of these people. Do I know you guys?" The burly man sneered. "Yours truly is surnamed Chang, and I'm the eldest son of my family. As a businessman, minor formalities matter little to me. You may call me Cheng Da." "Ah, so it's Da Cheng Gongzi," Mo-ran said as he smiled, having purposefully flipped his name around. "It's an honor to finally meet you. Please excuse my rudeness. And this other gentleman is?" Big Intestine Gongzi scoffed. "Ha, Mo Gongzi sure is fond of acting the fool. This may be our first meeting, but in the last month you've spent half your nights in Juer's bed. And you claim not to recognize him? Have you gone blind?" Mo-ran was entirely unperturbed, and he continued to smile as he glanced at Rongju. "What's this? Are you trying to slander me? I'm a decent, honorable person. Of course I've never slept with some San-er or Juer." Rongju's face was red with anger, but he continued to nestle into Cheng Da's chest, sobbing. "Momo Gongzi, I know my status is low and unseemly. If you hadn't exploited me so cruelly, I wouldn't have come calling. But to be treated in such a way, I really truly do not know you," Mo-ran said, in a tone as if he were the one who'd been wronged. "I can't even tell if you're male or female. How could we have met before?" "You patronized my business last night. How could you be so cold? Cheng Gongzi, you have to get justice on my behalf." Rongju burrowed even deeper into Cheng Da's arms as his crying ratcheted up a notch. Off to the side, Zhumeng's entire face was ashen, his frown twitching as he listened to this absurdity. If not for the self-restraint of his upbringing as a young master, he would have kicked this repulsive pair off the mountain long ago. Big Intestine Gongzi stroked Rongju's hair and soothed him with some murmured words before raising his head. "Madame Wang, Xisheng Peak is a virtuous, upright sect, but this Mo Gongzi is vulgar and despicable," he declared threateningly. "Juer works hard for his money, all to buy his own freedom as soon as possible. But this cretin, as if mistreating Juer wasn't enough, he even stole Juer's hard-earned savings. The Cheng family are not cultivators, but we are wealthy, and we've been traders for generations. If your sect doesn't satisfactorily account for itself today, you'll find yourselves facing no end of trouble in Sichuan." Madame Wang was flustered. Cheng Gongzi, please calm down. Mo-ran sneered to himself. The Cheng family were salt merchants and ludicrously loaded. Who would believe that the eldest son of that family couldn't afford to buy Rongju's freedom? That he would let his Juer earn his way himself? This smelled fishy, to say the least. Outwardly, however, his smile remained fixed. So Big Intestine Bro is the son of Yuzhu's affluent merchant family. You're impressive and commanding, as expected. How admirable. How very admirable. Big Intestine Gongzi looked quite smug. Humph, so you do know your place after all. Why don't you make this easy on yourself and fess up then? Where are Juer's things? Hurry up and return them. I'm curious, though, Moran said, still smiling. Your Juer has so many guests every day. Even if he did lose something, why am I being blamed? You! Big Intestine Gongzi gritted his teeth, sneering. Fine, fine, fine. I just knew you would try to wriggle out of this. Madame Wang, as you've just seen, Mo Gongzi refused to be responsible and come clean. I'm not going to waste my breath on him anymore. You're the one in charge. You decide. Madame Wang knew little of such affairs, and her words stumbled over each other in her nervousness. Aran, Meng Unwilling to let his mother be put on the spot, Zhu Meng stepped forward. Chen Gongzi, Seisheng Peak has strict disciplinary rules. If your accusations turn out to be true, if Moran indeed violated our rules against greed and promiscuity, we will naturally mete out severe punishment. However, it's your word against his. Have you any evidence? Big Intestine Gongzi smirked. I just knew your sect would pull this. That's why we rushed to get here before Moran arrived in order to confront Madame Wang. He cleared his throat. All of you listen well. Juer lost 2 units of pearls, 10 gold ingots, a pair of gold plum blossom bracelets, a pair of jade hairpins, and a jade butterfly pendant. Search Moran for these items, and the truth of my accusations will be made clear. What right do you have to search my body? Moran objected. Sounds like a guilty conscience to me. Big Intestine Gongzi lifted his chin pompously. Madame Wang, what are Seisheng Peak's punishments for the crimes of theft and lechery? My husband has always been the one in charge of sect matters, Madame Wang answered quietly. I genuinely do not know. Dubious, how dubious. I think Madame Wang is purposefully playing dumb to shield her nephew. Who would have thought that Seisheng Peak was actually such a corrupt, filthy place? That's quite enough out of you. My aunt already told you she's not used to making these kinds of decisions. Are you quite done bullying a woman? Moran cut in, finally fed up with this blathering. Even the carefree grin that usually graced his face had somewhat faded. He shot a sidelong glare at the nauseating couple. Fine, search me then. But what happens if you find nothing and all this turns out to be slander against my sect? Then I will promptly apologize to Mo Gongzi. Sure, Moran agreed easily enough. Just one thing. If you're wrong, then as an apology, you have to crawl off Seisheng Peak on your hands and knees. Moran's confidence made a seed of doubt take root within Big Intestine Gongzi's heart. He'd grown up holding cultivators in high regard, though he himself unfortunately had no talent for cultivation. A few days ago, on learning that his old paramour Rongju had somehow earned Moran's favor, he'd made a bargain with him. Rongju would find an opening to steal Moran's cultivation progress, and in exchange, Big Intestine Gongzi would buy his freedom. Not only that, he'd promised to take Rongju into his household and to take care of him for life. Big Intestine Gongzi longed for cultivation, and Rongju coveted riches. The pair of scoundrels were well matched in their collusion. In Moran's previous life, he had fallen for their scheme. He'd gotten even with them in the end, but not before suffering quite a bit. This time around, their ploy had entirely failed to bear fruit, for Moran had done a sudden about-face, and for no apparent reason either. Mere days ago, he'd still been in a drunken stupor, nestled tenderly in Rongju's arms and going, Juer this and Juer that. But this morning, he'd brutally fucked Rongju twice, unexpectedly taken all his belongings and valuables, and run off. Big Intestine Gongzi was naturally furious and had dragged Rongju to Seisheng Peak to complain. This salt merchant Gongzi was a shrewd businessman. He figured that if he busted Moran, then he could force Madame Wang to disperse Moran's cultivation. He'd come prepared with a cultivation-absorbing jade pendant to gather some easy pickings, which he would later on assimilate into his own spiritual reservoir. But as he looked at Moran now, Big Intestine Gongzi hesitated. Moran was a crafty fellow. What if he'd already sold the stolen goods and was just waiting to pull one over them? Then again, things had come to this point, and it would be a waste to give up at this point. Maybe Moran was just bluffing. While he stewed in these thoughts, Moran had gone ahead and started stripping. He took off his outer robe, casually tossed it aside, and gestured an invitation, smiling. Go ahead and search me. Take your time. After all that racket, in the end, they found nothing but some spare change. Big Intestine Gongzi's expression entirely transformed. Impossible! You're definitely pulling some kind of trick. Moran narrowed his dark, purple-tinged eyes and stroked his chin. You've turned my robe inside out 10 times, and you've touched me all over a ton as well. There's nothing left to do short of getting me totally naked, and you're still not giving up? Moran had a sudden realization. I get it. Big Intestine Gongzi, could it be that you've been lusting after my good looks and put on this whole show just to take advantage of me and cop a feel? Big Intestine Gongzi was so enraged that he was nearly about to pass out. His whole face was red with anger, and while he pointed at Moran, he was unable to manage a single word. Zhu Meng, watching from the side, had long since hit the limit of his patience. He might have disapproved of Moran, but Moran was a member of Xisheng Peak, and outsiders had no right to degrade him. Zhu Meng strode forward with not a trace of politeness, raised his hand, and unhesitatingly broke Big Intestine Gongzi's finger. We've humored you for half the night, he admonished him, but it turns out you were just making trouble out of nothing. Big Intestine Gongzi howled in pain and cradled his finger. All of you, you're in on it together. No wonder nothing was on Moran. You must have hidden it all. You stripped too. Let me search you. Zhu Meng flew into a humiliation-driven rage. Someone had actually dared to order him to strip. Shameless! You really think those dog paws of yours are fit to touch even the corner of my hem? Get the hell out! Now that the young master had spoken, the attendants in Loyalty Hall, also long since fed up with this facade, surged forth to clear out this pair of ordinary folk. They had no means by which to resist, and were soundly kicked off the mountain. Big Intestine Gongzi's furious screeching echoed in the distance. Moran, just you wait! I'm not done with you yet! Moran stood outside Loyalty Hall and gazed at the night sky, his eyes curved in a smile as he sighed. Wow, I'm so scared. Zhu Meng shot him a cold glare. What are you so scared of? They're salt merchants, Moran said with genuine worry. I'm afraid that in the future, I won't get to have any more salt, of course. Zhu Meng was silent for a moment. You really didn't screw that prostitute? Nope. And you really didn't steal from him? Nope. Zhu Meng humphed. I don't believe you. Moran raised a hand, laughing. Let the heavens strike me down with lightning if I'm lying. Zhu Meng abruptly lifted his hand and grabbed Moran's arm in a vice grip. Moran stared at him. What are you doing? Zhu Meng humphed again and rapidly chanted an incantation. Scattered sounds were heard as a handful of beads, each about the size of a soybean, slipped out of Moran's sleeve and fell to the ground. Zhu Meng gathered spiritual energy in his hand and waved towards the beads, which glowed and grew in size until they turned into a pile of jewels and valuables. Plum blossom bracelets and jade earrings lay golden and sparkling on the ground. We're fellow disciples of the same sect, said Moran after a pause. Don't make things difficult. Zhu Meng glowered. Mo Wei, you no shame. No one's laughing with you, Zhu Meng roared. Moran sighed. It's not like I can cry on command. Zhu Meng's face was dark. Is this how you use Xisheng Peak's concealing technique? Mm-hmm. Practical application of knowledge and all that, you know. That salt merchant was an annoying mutt, so I didn't call you out in front of him, but he did get something right. Zhu Meng angrily continued, to violate the rules against theft and lechery like you have is to ask for punishment, no matter which sect you're from. Moran grinned, undaunted. And what are you going to do about it? Wait for Uncle to come back to tattle on me? He wasn't even worried. His uncle spoiled him to no end. At most, he would scold Moran a little. He'd never have the heart to beat him. Zhu Meng turned around, brushing his wind-blown hair aside, his eyes glinting with scorn in the dark of night. Dad? No, he's at Kunlun and won't be back for a month or two. Moran's smile froze as an ominous feeling washed over him. He had suddenly remembered a certain person. But if he were here, then he would have been the one to receive Chen Gongzi at Loyalty Hall, not the oblivious Madame Wang. That person couldn't be around, right? The flickering emotion in Moran's eyes intensified Zhu Meng's air of disdain. My father does spoil you too much, but isn't there a certain someone here at Xisheng Peak who doesn't coddle you? Moran slowly backed away a few steps, a forced smile on his face. My esteemed cousin, it's so late already. Let's not disturb our elders' peace and quiet. I was wrong, and there won't be a next time. How about that? Please go get some rest. You look so tired. And then he made a run for it. You've got to be kidding me. The Zhu Meng guy is far too ruthless. At present, Moran wasn't Taxian Jun, ruler of the mortal realm, so how could he risk falling into the hands of the individual in question? If that guy found out he'd stolen things and gone whoring, he'd probably break both of Moran's legs. If he didn't run now, he wouldn't get another chance. End of 5. Chapter 6. This Venerable One's Shizun. Zhu Meng had grown up on Xisheng Peak, so he naturally knew all its ins, outs, and shortcuts. Ultimately, he managed to catch Moran. Zhu Meng dragged the captured Moran to the mountain's backwoods. The area behind Xisheng Peak was where the mortal realm came closest to the ghost realm. Between the two realms lay a barrier, and beyond that barrier lay the underworld. When Moran took in the appalling state of the area, he immediately understood why it had been Madame Wang in the main hall receiving visitors, even when this other individual was present. It wasn't that this person didn't want to help, it was that he really couldn't step away. The barrier to the ghost realm had ruptured. At present, the entire backwoods was permeated with the essence of evil. Incorporeal ghosts swirled in the air, wailing in despair, their howling full of rancor. A breach had ripped open the sky, so immense it could be seen from as far away as the gate to the mountains. A long blue stone staircase, thousands of steps high, extended down from the fissure in the barrier, and beyond the fissure lay the ghost realm. Menacing ghosts who had cultivated a fleshly form crawled down these steps in great numbers as they crossed from the realm of the dead into the realm of the living. If a normal person were to lay eyes upon this sight, they would no doubt be scared out of their mind. The first time Moran had seen something like this, he, too, had been soaked with cold sweat. By now, he was used to it. The barrier between the mortal and the ghost realms had first been built in an ancient era by Emperor Fuxi. Over the passage of time, it had become thin and weakened. It often cracked and broke in various places, requiring repair by cultivators. However, a task like this not only didn't do much to elevate one's cultivation, it was also incredibly taxing on one's spiritual power. To work so hard for no reward was an arduous chore, and so few cultivators in the cultivation world were willing to take on the burden. When menacing spirits entered the world, the ones they attacked first were the common people of the lower cultivation realm. As the protectors of the lower cultivation realm, Xisheng Peak thus took on the job of repairing breaches. The mountains behind the sect's grounds faced the weakest point of the barrier. This was all for the sake of being able to make such repairs in time. Furthermore, this ragged barrier failed at least 4 or 5 times a year, like a pot that constantly needed to be patched. A man stood atop the bluestone staircase, at the entrance to the ghost realm. His snow-white robes fluttered, expansive sleeves flying in the wind, and the aura of his blade enveloped him in a shimmering golden light. He was single-handedly sweeping up those menacing spirits, clearing the evil ghosts away, and repairing the breach in the barrier with his power. The man was slender in form and elegant in appearance, with a graceful, ethereal aura and a face that was both exceedingly handsome and beautiful. From afar, it was easy to imagine him as a dignified scholar standing beneath a blossoming tree, studying a scroll with a mystical and studious air. But a closer look revealed sharp, sword-like brows, phoenix eyes tilted upward at the corners, and a narrow, straight nose. Despite these refined and stately features, there was something harsh about his gaze that made him look particularly unapproachable. Moran watched him from a distance. Although he thought himself prepared, if he was honest with himself, seeing that figure appear once more before him, healthy and well, made him shudder down to the smallest fragments of his bones. Half dread, half thrill. His Shizun, Chu Wanning. The person whom Zhu Meng had cried and begged to see when he'd come to Wushan Palace in their previous life. It had been this man who ruined Moran's grandest plans. He'd sunk Moran's lofty ambitions, and Moran had, in the end, imprisoned and tortured him to death. Logically speaking, Moran should have been glad to defeat this opponent and get the revenge he'd always wanted. Like a fish free to swim in the wide ocean, or a bird free to fly in the boundless skies, Moran had been freed of anyone to keep him in check. Originally, Moran had thought he would think this way, but things had not panned out as such. When his Shizun died, Moran's hatred had been buried, along with something else that he couldn't quite put his finger on. Moran was no man of culture and didn't recognize the something else as the feeling of being evenly matched with a worthy opponent. He only knew that from then on, he had no true nemesis in the world. With his Shizun alive, Moran had lived in fear, dread, and anxiety. The mere sight of the willow vine in his Shizun's hand had made his entire body break out in goosebumps. just like how the mere sound of a wooden club knocking would make an oft-beaten dog shrink back, teeth aching and legs giving way, drool dripping from the corners of its lips. Even the muscles of his calves would spasm from nervousness. With his Shizun dead, the person Mo-ran most feared had lived no longer. Finally being able to commit the sin of murdering his mentor had made Mo-ran feel like he'd grown up, matured. After that, when his gaze swept over the mortal realm, there had been no one left who would dare to force him to kneel, no one left who would dare slap him in the face. To celebrate, he'd opened a pot of pear-blossom white wine and sat on the rooftop drinking for an entire night. That night, under the influence of alcohol, the scars on his back, left by Shizun's whip in his youth, had burned once more with fresh pain. At this very moment, seeing his Shizun standing again before him with his own eyes, Mo-ran couldn't help but stare. He felt both fear and resentment, but also the faintest trace of a twisted sort of ecstasy. He had regained such an opponent after having lost him. How could he not be delighted? Chu Wanning was completely focused on fighting the scattered souls of the dead. He had no attention to spare for the two disciples who had intruded on the untamed stretch of the mountains. He had an elegant face with long and even brows, and beneath, that pair of phoenix eyes. His demeanor was graceful, dignified, and otherworldly. Even in the face of demonic miasma and bloody rain, his cool and distant expression remained unchanged. It wouldn't have looked strange or out of place if he were to sit down on the spot to light incense and play the chin. However, this elegant, calm, and beautiful man was currently wielding a chilling exorcist's longsword that dripped with blood. With a single flick of his wide sleeve, the force of his blade sliced through the verdant stone steps to produce an explosion. Rubble and debris tumbled all the way down to the bottom of the mountain, and a rift of unfathomable depth split that staircase in its thousands of steps. Such brutal ferocity. How many years had it been since Mo-ran had last witnessed his Shizun's strength? Mo-ran's legs went weak, a conditioned response to that familiar, valiant, overbearing force. Unsteady, he dropped to his knees on the ground. In no time at all, Chu Wanning annihilated the last of the ghosts and neatly patched the ruptured rift to the ghost realm. After completing this task, he gracefully descended from the sky to land before Mo-ran and Xu Meng. He first glanced at Mo-ran, kneeling on the ground, before looking up to Xu Meng, the cast of his phoenix eyes somewhat icy. Causing trouble again? Mo-ran had to concede. His Shizun possessed the ability to assess the situation and immediately come to the most accurate conclusion. Shizun, Mo-ran went down the mountain and committed the crimes of theft and debauchery, said Xu Meng. Please mete out his punishment. Chu Wanning was silent for a moment, expression completely blank. Then he said coldly, I see. Mo-ran and Xu Meng were struck silent. They were both a little taken aback. And? Was that it? Yet just as Mo-ran was starting to think he'd gotten off easy, he stole a glimpse at Chu Wanning and was caught entirely off guard. A flash of sharp golden light violently slashed through the air, and a crackle like lightning whipped directly across Mo-ran's cheek. Splatters of blood blossomed everywhere. The speed of that golden light was shocking. Never mind dodging, Mo-ran hadn't even had time to close his eyes before the flesh of his face was slashed open. The wound burned painfully. Chu Wanning stood stonily in the howling winds, hands clasped behind his back. The night air was still filthy and thick with the stench of menacing spirits. With the addition of the scent of freshly spilt human blood, this restricted area at the back of the mountain was made even more horrifying and eerie. The thing that had whipped Mo-ran was a willow vine, which had appeared from out of nowhere in Chu Wanning's hand. The vine hung all the way down to Chu Wanning's boots, and it was long and thin, with tender green leaves sprouting along its length. This vine was undoubtedly an elegant object, one that called to mind verses of poetry like, Pliant is the willow branch I gift to my beloved. Unfortunately, Chu Wanning was neither pliant nor in possession of a beloved. The willow vine in his hand was in fact a holy weapon called Tianwen, and it sparked with bright gold and crimson light, illuminating the darkness all around as well as the bottomless depths of Chu Wanning's eyes, bringing them to life. Mo Wei-yu, you certainly are brazen, Chu Wanning said, voice chilly. Did you really think I wouldn't discipline you? If Mo-ran had been his original 15-year-old self, he might not have taken Chu Wanning's words seriously. He might even have thought that his Shizun was only bluffing to scare him. However, This Mo Weiyu who had been reborn had, in his previous life, long since paid the blood price to learn just what his Shizun's discipline looked like. Instantly, the roots of his teeth ached and blood rushed to his head. His mouth was already running, feverishly, denying everything in hopes of clearing his name. Shizun, cheeks still bleeding, Mo-ran raised his eyes, letting them fill with the sheen of tears. He knew that his current disposition was both incredibly pathetic and incredibly pitiful. This disciple has never stolen anything, has never committed debauchery. Why would Shizun hit me purely on the basis of Zhumeng's word, without even having asked for my side of the story? Silence reigned. Against his uncle, Mo-ran had two ultimate tricks. Number 1, act cute. Number 2, act pitiful. Now he turned both moves on Chu Wanning, looking so aggrieved that his tears threatened to spill over. Is this disciple really so worthless in your eyes? How come Shizun won't even give me a chance to explain? Next to them, Zhumeng was so incensed that he stomped his foot. Mo-ran, you dog-leg, you're shameless. Shizun, don't listen to him. Don't let this bastard confuse you. He really is a thief. All the stolen property is still here. Chu Wanning lowered his gaze, his face cool and distant. Mo-ran, did you really not steal anything? I would never. A pause. You know the consequences of lying to me. Mo-ran's entire body broke out in goose flesh. How could he not know? Even so, he remained stubborn as a mule. Shizun, please look into the facts first. Chu Wanning raised his hand. That scintillating vine swept forward again. This time, instead of whipping Mo-ran's face, it wrapped itself tightly around Mo-ran's body. The sensation was one Mo-ran recognized all too well. Other than whipping people on the daily, the willow vine Tianwen had another use. Chu Wanning stared at Mo-ran, bound in Tianwen's death grip, and asked once more, You really didn't steal anything? Suddenly, all Mo-ran could feel was a familiar agony piercing straight into his heart, as if a sharp-fanged little snake had slithered its way into his chest and was wreaking havoc amidst his organs. Accompanying the stabbing pain was an irresistible temptation. Mo-ran's mouth opened in spite of himself, and he gasped, I have never... Tianwen's golden light went berserk, as if it could sense his lies. But though the pain was so great that it drenched Mo-ran in cold sweat, he resisted the torture with all he had. This was Tianwen's second function outside of whipping, interrogation. Once bound by Tianwen, none could lie under its power. No matter whether they were human or ghost, alive or dead, Tianwen had the ability to force them to speak, thereby giving Chu Wanning the answers to his questions. Only one person in their previous life had, through sheer strength of cultivation, ever managed to keep a secret from Tianwen. That person was none other than the one who had become the emperor of the mortal realm, Mo Weiyu. The freshly reborn Mo-ran had high hopes and thought that he might be able to fight Tianwen's brutal interrogation like he once had. But, after what felt like an eternity of biting down on his lips as enormous beads of sweat dripped down his ink-dark brows and full-body shivers racked his body, in the end, he was left prostrate from pain. He knelt at Chu Wanning's feet, gasping out heaving breaths. I did steal something. The pain abruptly disappeared. Mo-ran hadn't even caught his breath before Chu Wanning's next question came, his voice even colder than before. Did you commit debauchery? Clever men didn't commit stupid deeds. If he had been unable to resist Tianwen earlier, it would be even more impossible to do so now. This time, Mo-ran didn't even bother to object. The moment the pain came, he cried out, I did. Shizun, please, no more. To the side, Zhumeng's face was just about turning blue. How could you? That wronged you as a man, and yet you... He went ignored as Tianwen's golden light slowly dimmed. Mo-ran gasped down great mouthfuls of air, and his entire body was soaked like he'd just been fished out of water. His face was white as the sheet, and his lips trembled uncontrollably as he lay on the ground, unable to move. Through his sweat-damp lashes, he could see Chu Wanning's blurry yet elegant silhouette, with its jade crown and broad sleeves that draped to the ground. A wave of powerful hatred suddenly coursed through his heart. Chu Wanning, this venerable one, wasn't wrong to treat you the way he did in his previous life. Even after coming back to life, the mere sight of you is still aggravating. Fuck all 18 generations of your ancestors. Chu Wanning was unaware that his beast of his disciple was going to fuck all 18 generations of his ancestors. He stood where he was for a moment, face dark, before saying, Zhumeng. Even though Zhumeng knew that the current trend among the young masters of wealthy houses was to play around with male prostitutes, and that the appeal lay in its novelty and not necessarily in an actual interest in men, he found all this rather hard to swallow. It took him a moment to reply. Shizun, this disciple is present. Mo-ran has violated the 3 mandates against greed, promiscuity, and deception. Take him to Yanua Hall for penance. At dawn tomorrow, bring him to the platform of sin and virtue to be punished before all. Zhumeng was shocked. What? Before all? To be punished before all meant that a disciple who had committed grave sins would be dragged before the gathered disciples of the sect to be sentenced and punished in front of them. Even the grannies in the cafeteria would be brought out. It would be utterly humiliating. You must understand that Mo-ran was a young master of Xisheng Peak. Although the rules of the sect could have been said to be strict, Mo-ran had always been accorded special status. His uncle, feeling sorry for how Mo-ran had lost his parents at such a young age and had been stranded in the outside world for a whole 14 years, always coddled him. Even if Mo-ran made mistakes, he only got a private lecture from his uncle, and the man had never once beaten him. But Mo-ran's Shizun wouldn't give face, even to the sect leader. He indeed intended to drag the man's precious nephew to the platform of sin and virtue, where he would punish and shame Mo Gongzi before the entire sect. To Zhumeng, this was utterly shocking. Mo-ran, on the other hand, wasn't surprised at all. He lay on the ground, his lips curling into a sneer. Oh, how righteous his Shizun was so full of justice. Chu Wanning was a cold-blooded person. In their previous life, Shime had died before his very eyes. Mo-ran had cried and pleaded, tugged at the hem of his robes, knelt on the ground, and begged for his help. But Chu Wanning had turned a deaf ear on his pleas. And so, Chu Wanning's own disciple had breathed his last at his feet, while beside him, Mo-ran cried his heart out. Even then, Chu Wanning had watched on without lifting a finger. It wasn't remotely strange for him to drag Mo-ran to the platform of sin and virtue and sentence him in public. Mo-ran could only resent his current self's weak cultivation. He resented that he couldn't peel off Chu Wanning's skin, pull out his nerves, and drink his blood. Resented that he couldn't yank Chu Wanning's hair back, couldn't violate and corrupt him to his heart's content, couldn't torment him and destroy his dignity, couldn't make him live a life worse than death. Mo-ran only let the bestial savagery in his eyes slip for a moment, but Chu Wanning caught a glimpse of it. He glanced at Mo-ran's face, his own graceful, scholarly mien, completely devoid of expression. What are you thinking about? Shit! Tianwen hadn't been withdrawn. Mo-ran once again felt the vine binding him squeeze and twist, making his organs feel like they were going to wrench into mush. He screamed in agony, letting loose the thoughts in his mind. Chu Wanning, you think you're so tough? Watch me fuck you to death. Silence fell. Chu Wanning was speechless. Even Zhumeng was dumbfounded. Tianwen abruptly returned to Chu Wanning's palm, transforming it to specks of golden light before eventually disappearing out of sight. Tianwen manifested from Chu Wanning's essence, and it could appear when summoned and disappear at will. Zhumeng's face was pale as he stammered, Shizun. Chu Wanning didn't speak. His long, inky, delicate lashes were lowered as he looked at his own palm for a long moment. Then he raised his eye, face unmoved other than for how long it had become slightly icier than before. For a long moment, he pinned Mo-ran with a glare that said, This beastly disciple deserves death. Then he spoke, voice low. Tianwen is broken. I'm going to fix it. After dropping this statement, Chu Wanning turned and left. Zhumeng wasn't a bright child. How can a holy weapon like Tianwen be broken? Chu Wanning heard him. He turned and once again used that "this beastly disciple deserves death" gaze to glance at him. Zhumeng felt a chill run down his spine. Mo-ran lay on the ground, half dead, his expression lifeless. Earlier, he really had been thinking about finding a chance to fuck Chu Wanning to death. He was well aware that this Chu Zongxi, with his titles like Yuheng of the Night Sky and Bedu Immortal, was someone who paid exacting attention to refined, elegant manners and his own dignity. More than anything, he couldn't bear the thought of being squashed under someone's foot, of being sullied and abused. How could he have let Chu Wanning hear something like that? Mo-ran howled pathetically like an abandoned dog, covering his face. As he recalled the look in Chu Wanning's eyes as he'd left, Mo-ran got the feeling that his own demise was probably imminent. Chapter 7. This venerable one likes wontons. The sun blazed down from above. The vast grounds of Xisheng Peak stretched out for 100 miles. As a newcomer among the cultivation sects, Shizun Peak differed from the famed sects of the upper cultivation realm. Take, for example, the illustrious Lingyi Rufeng sect. Their main hall was named Six Virtues Hall to encourage their disciples to adhere to the virtues of wisdom, integrity, holiness, righteousness, benevolence, and loyalty. The residential dwelling where disciples stayed was called Six Conducts Gate, reminding their disciples of the importance of filial piety to one's parents, camaraderie with one's peers, harmony with one's neighbors, respect for one's spouse, duty to society, and compassion for the masses. The study area was named Six Arts Platform, meaning that disciples were expected to be masters of ritual, music, archery, writing, calligraphy, and arithmetic. In short, endless elegance. On the other hand, Shizun Peak had come from humble origins, and its names were hard to explain, to say the least. Loyalty Hall and the Platform of Sin and Virtue were acceptable. However, perhaps because Moran's father and uncle weren't exactly scholars and had been unable to choke out that many decent names, after a few they'd given up and started goofing around, assigning Zhuya-esque names left and right. Thus, many names on Shizun Peak had been plagiarized from the underworld. For example, the self-reflection room was called Yangluo Hall, the bridge connecting the recess and study areas was called Naihe Bridge, the dining hall was called Mengpo Hall, and the training field was called the Mountain of Daggers and Sea of Flames. Meanwhile, the forbidden area in the backwoods was called the Ghost Zone. So on and so forth. At least these were relatively okay. The more out-of-the-way areas had particularly forthright names like, "This is a mountain," "This is water," and "This is a hole," as well as the famed "Ah" and "Wah" cliffs. The elders' quarters naturally hadn't escaped unscathed, and each had their own nicknames. And also naturally... Chu Wanning was no exception. He liked peace and quiet and didn't care to live near others. His residence was located at the southern summit of Shizun Peak, hidden in a grove of cultivated bamboo that resembled an ocean of green jade. Before the main pavilion there lay a pond, which was covered in red lotuses that, thanks to an abundance of spiritual energy, bloomed as resplendently as crimson clouds throughout the season. The disciples secretly called this elegant and scenic locale Red Lotus Hell. When Moran thought about it, he couldn't help but snicker. Chu Wanning wore a frightful, sour face day in and day out. To the disciples, catching sight of him was like catching sight of a demon. And what should the home of demons be called, if not hell? "The hell are you giggling about?" Zhumeng demanded, interrupting his daydream. "Hurry and finish your breakfast. I have to take you to the platform of sin and virtue after this. Did you forget that Shizun is going to discipline you in front of everyone today?" Moran sighed and gingerly touched the lash mark on his face. "Ow. Serves you right," he sighed. "I wonder if Tianwen has been fixed yet. If not, please don't interrogate me with it again. Who knows what other nonsense I might spout." Faced with Moran's genuine concerns, Zhumeng's face flushed with anger. "If you dare to be improper towards Shizun in public, I'll rip your tongue out," he threatened. Moran covered his face with one hand and waved the other. No need," he croaked faintly. "If Shizun ties me up with that willow vine again, I'll just end myself on the spot to prove my innocence." Early in the morning, as the appointed time arrived, Moran was brought out onto the platform of sin and virtue in accordance with custom. He cast his gaze out. Below him, a sea of people dressed in dark blue stood as far as the eye could see. The disciples of Shizun Peak all wore the sect uniform. Light armor so blue as to be nearly black, a lion's head belt, wrist guards, and clothing trimmed in sparkling silver. The sun rose from the east, illuminating an ocean of gleaming armor below the platform of sin and virtue. Moran knelt on the high platform, listening to the Jielu elder read the lengthy indictment. "The Yuheng elder's disciple, Mo Weiyu, has disregarded our commandments, ignored our teachings, disrespected sect mandates, and abandoned morality, violating the 4th, 9th, and 15th rules. His punishment will be to receive 80 strikes, to copy the sect rules 100 times, and to reflect in confinement for 1 month. Mo Weiyu, have you anything to say in your defense?" Moran glanced at the white silhouette in the distance. That elder was the only person in the entirety of Shishun Peak who wasn't required to wear the standard silver-trimmed blue uniform. Chu Wanning wore snow-white satin with an outer drape of cloud-patterned silver silk. It was as if he was swathed in clear frost from the highest of the heavens. But the person himself seemed more frigid than either white snow or clear frost. He sat placidly, too far away for Mo Ran to see his expression, but Mo Ran knew without needing to see that this person was probably entirely unperturbed. Inhaling deeply, Mo Ran replied, "I have nothing to say in my defense." Next, in accordance with custom, the Jielu elder spoke to the disciples gathered below. "If anyone disagrees with this judgment or has any appeals to make, you may now speak." The disciples fidgeted, glancing at one another. No one had ever thought that the Yuheng elder, Chu Wanning, would actually send his own disciple to the platform of sin and virtue to be punished in public. Put politely, this was called being strict and impartial. Put frankly, it was called being a cold-blooded demon. Cold-blooded demon Chu Wanning wore an air of indifference, sitting in his seat with his chin propped up in one hand. Suddenly, someone shouted using an amplification technique, "Yuheng elder, this disciple would like to plead for leniency on behalf of Mo Shidi." "Is that so?" The disciple clearly thought that, even if Mo Ran had made a blunder, since he was the sect leader's nephew, his prospects were still bright and promising. Thus, he decided to seize the opportunity to curry favor with Mo Ran and started to spout nonsense. "Although Mo Shidi has erred, he is cordial with his fellow disciples and shows compassion to the small and weak in his everyday conduct. Will the Yuheng elder please grant leniency in view of his kind nature?" This fellow wasn't the only one hoping to curry favor with Mo Shidi. More and more people began to speak on Mo Ran's behalf, on grounds fantastic and varied. Even Mo Ran grew embarrassed listening to them. When had he ever been pure and innocent, broad-minded and open? Was this assembly for punishment or commendation? "Yuheng elder, Mo Shidi once helped me defeat demons and slay vicious beasts. I would like to request recognition for Mo Shidi's merits, for his merits to undo his demerits, and request that the elder lessen his punishment. Yuheng elder, when I experienced chi deviation, it was Mo Shidi who helped me dispel my inner demons. I believe Mo Shidi only erred due to a brief lapse in judgment, and I request that the elder lighten Shidi's punishment. Yuheng elder, Mo Shidi once bestowed upon me an elixir to save my mother. He is virtuous and benevolent by nature. Elder, please be lenient." The final person's pretext had been taken by the person before him, and he was left at a loss for words. Chu Wanning's frosty gaze swept toward him, and he rambled out in a panic. "Yuheng elder, Mo Shidi once helped me dual cultivate." Someone failed to hold in their laughter. The last disciple blushed up to his ears and withdrew in embarrassment. "Yuheng, calm down," said the Jielu elder, who, seeing this turn of events, hurriedly tried to soothe him. "I have never seen a person this shameless," Chu Wanning said starkly. "What is his name? Whose disciple is this?" The Jielu elder hesitated slightly, then forced himself to quietly respond, "My disciple, Yao Lian." Chu Wanning raised his eyebrows. "Your disciple? Save face?" This was acutely awkward for the Jielu elder, whose old face turned bright red as he tried to change the topic. "He's got a decent singing voice. Good to keep around when receiving offerings." Chu Wanning humphed and turned away, not wanting to waste any more breath on the shameless Jielu elder. There were thousands of people in Shishun Peak. A couple of sycophants here and there was nothing out of the ordinary. As Mo Ran took in the persistent conviction of his sect brothers, even he almost began to believe them. Impressive, truly impressive. As it turned out, he wasn't the only one in this sect adept at spewing lies in broad daylight. This place was brimming with talented people. After countless pleas of Yuheng elder, please be merciful, Chu Wanning finally spoke. "You plead on behalf of Mo Weiyu?" He paused before continuing. "Very well. Come here." Unsure of what to expect, the supplicants went up to him with fear and trepidation. A golden light flashed in Chu Wanning's hand, and Tianwen appeared as commanded. With a whoosh, it wrapped the dozen-some disciples in a bundle and bound them firmly in place. Not this again! Mo Ran was about to lose all hope. The mere sight of Tianwen made his legs go weak. Where the hell had Chu Wanning even obtained that freakish weapon? It was a good thing Chu Wanning had never taken a wife in their previous lifetime. Pity the woman stuck with him. If she didn't get whipped to death, she'd probably be interrogated to the same end. Chu Wanning's gaze was full of scorn as he singled out one disciple in the group. "Mo Ran helped you defeat demons?" The disciple had no chance against Tianwen's torment and instantly howled, "No, no!" He moved on to the next. "Mo Ran helped you break out of a chi deviation?" "Ah, never, never." "Mo Ran gave you an elixir?" "Ah, help! No, I made it up. Chu Wanning loosened the bindings, but immediately after, he raised his hands in a ruthless brandish. Sparks flew as Tianwen lashed out to land brutally against the backs of those lying disciples. Shrieks instantly rang out, and blood spattered everywhere. Chu Wanning's brow drew down in a frown as he berated them. "What are you yelling for? Kneel! Discipline attendant. Present. Deliver the punishment. Understood." Ultimately, not only did these people not manage to gain favor, they also earned 10 strikes each for violating the mandate against deception, plus a free bonus lash from the Yuheng elder. Nightfall found Mo Ran sprawled out on his bed. Even though medicinal ointment had been applied to his back, it was still covered in criss-crossing lashes, and it was impossible to even turn over. He let out a few sniffles, eyes watering from the pain. With his cute looks, this whimperings made him seem like a fluffy kitten that had been woefully beaten. Unfortunately, his inner thoughts were nothing like those of a kitten. He gripped the blankets and bit into the bed sheets, imagining that bastard Chu Wanning in their place. He bit, stomped, kicked, ripped. His only comfort was that Shi Mei had come to visit him with the bowl of handmade wontons. Under Shi Mei's gentle, compassionate gaze, Mo Ran's tears fell even more fiercely. He didn't care for sayings like, "Men don't cry." He loved to act cute and spoiled in front of the person he liked. "Does it hurt too much? Are you able to sit up?" Shi Mei sat at the edge of his bed and let out a sigh. "Shizun, his hand was far too heavy. Look at your wounds. Some of them are even still bleeding." Warmth rose in Mo Ran's chest as he listened to these sympathetic words. He looked up with teary eyes and batted his lashes. "Knowing Shi Mei cares for me so much, I don't feel the pain anymore." "Oh, look at the state of you. How can it not hurt? You should be more than familiar with Shizun's temperament. No more mistakes like that in the future, okay?" Shi Mei looked at him with equal parts helplessness and sympathy, his expressive eyes gleaming in the candlelight like warm spring waters. Mo Ran's heart skipped a beat. "It won't happen again," he answered obediently. "I swear." "Who can even take your vows seriously anymore?" Shi Mei scolded, but he was smiling. "The wontons are getting cold. Can you get up? Just stay put if not. I'll feed you." Mo Ran was already halfway up, but at these words, he instantly collapsed back down. Shi Mei gave him a look. In both this lifetime and the last, Shi Mei's wontons were Mo Ran's favorite dish. With wrappers thin as clouds and filling tender as cream, every bite of the satisfyingly plump, soft, and savory dumplings practically melted in his mouth, leaving behind a delectable aftertaste. Most of all, he loved the soup, simmered to a rich, milky consistency, sprinkled with bits of chopped green scallion and tender wisps of yellow eggs, and finally a spoonful of chili oil pepper, stir-fried in garlic paste, which warmed you from the inside out as you ate it. Shi Mei fed him attentively, spoonful by spoonful. "I didn't add any chili oil today. Your injuries are too severe, and spicy food isn't good when you're recovering. Settle for the broth, okay?" Mo Ran gazed at him, smiling, unable and unwilling to look away. "Everything you make is delicious, spicy or not." "Flatterer." Shi Mei smiled back and picked out the poached egg in the soup. "Here's a runny egg as a reward. I know you like those." Mo Ran laughed mischievously, a silly tuft of hair curling up from his head like a blooming flower. "Shi Mei." "Yes?" "Nothing. Just felt like saying your name." Shi Mei was quiet. The hair tuft swayed back and forth. "Shi Mei." Shi Mei suppressed a laugh. "Just saying it again?" "Mm-hmm. Saying your name makes me happy." Shi Mei hesitated for a moment, then tenderly felt his forehead. "Silly child, do you have a fever?" Mo Ran chuckled and rolled over halfway to peek at him sideways, eyes brightly shining like they were full of stars. "I wish I could eat Shi Mei's wontons every day." He meant every word. After Shi Mei's death, Mo Ran had longed to taste his handmade wontons again, but that flavor had disappeared forever. At that time, Chu Wanning hadn't yet completely broken off relations with him. Perhaps due to a guilty conscience, after seeing the way Mo Ran remained kneeling in front of Shi Mei's coffin in a stupor, Chu Wanning had quietly gone to the kitchens. There, he'd kneaded dough, chopped up the filling, and carefully folded a few wontons. However, Mo Ran had caught him before he could finish. Mo Ran, who had just lost his true love, had been unable to tolerate this. Chu Waning's actions had seemed to him like a mockery, a clumsy imitation, a deliberate stab. Shimei was dead. Chu Waning could have saved him, but he had refused to help. Now he dared to try to make Mo Ran wontons in place of Shimei. Had he thought that would make Mo Ran happy? Mo Ran had rushed into the kitchen and knocked everything over. Plump white wontons had rolled all over the floor. He had roared at Chu Waning, "Who the fuck do you think you are? Do you have any right to use the things he used to make the food he made? Shimei is dead. Are you happy now? Or do you have to hound all your disciples to death or madness before you're satisfied? Chu Waning, there's no one left in this world who could make those wontons ever again. No matter how much you imitate him, you'll never even come close." Eating this bowl of wontons now, Mo Ran was both overjoyed and greatly moved. He kept smiling as he ate, but his eyes grew slightly damp. Thankfully, the candlelight was dim, and Shimei couldn't clearly see the minute details of his expression. "Shimei," said Mo Ran. Thank you." Shimei paused for a second, then smiled kindly. "Isn't it just a bowl of wontons? There's no need to be so formal. If you like them, I'll make them for you more often." Mo Ran wanted to say, "The thanks isn't just for the wontons. Thank you also, in both this lifetime and the last, for being the only person to never look down on me, who didn't pay any mind to my origins, who didn't care about the 14 years I spent struggling to survive by any means, fair or foul. Thank you also, because if not for the fact that I remembered you at that moment when I was first reborn, I probably would have killed Rongju, repeated a grave mistake, and walked the same bitter path as before. Thankfully, I was reborn before your death. I will definitely protect you this time. If anything happens to you, even if that cold-blooded demon Chu Waning won't save you, I will." But there was no way he could say any of this. In the end, Mo Ran finished the soup without saying anything. He left not even a sliver of chopped scallions. He licked his lips as if he wanted more, his dimples distinct and charming, looking cute as a fuzzy kitten. "Can I have more tomorrow?" Shimei didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "Don't you want to try something else? Won't you get tired of them?" "I'll never get tired of your wontons as long as you don't get tired of me." Shimei laughed, shaking his head. "I'm not sure how much flour is left. If there isn't enough flour for wontons, how about eggs and sweet soup instead? I remember you liked that one too." "Okie dokie, as long as you make it, anything is fine." Mo Ran was elated, so happy he could have rolled around hugging his quilt. "Look how tender and caring Shimei is. Chu Waning, go ahead and whip me if you like. I've got a beauty to take care of me when I'm laid out in bed." Just thinking about that Shizun of his lit a flame of anger in the midst of his tender sentiments. Mo Ran dug resentfully into the crack between the bed and the headboard once again, cursing internally. "You hung of the night sky, Bedu immortal? What bullshit. Chu Waning, in this lifetime, just you wait and see." End of 7. Sorry, taking a drink. Okay. Chapter 8. This venerable one gets punished. Mo Ran spent 3 whole days lying on his bed like a dead fish. His wounds had only just closed when he received a summons telling him to get the hell over to the Red Lotus Pavilion to do manual labor. This was part of the punishment as well. Mo Ran couldn't go down the mountain during his period of confinement, but neither was he permitted to just sit around, and so he would help out by doing odd jobs around the sect. These odd jobs were generally things like helping the cafeteria lady at Mengpo Hall wash dishes, giving the 365 stone lions on the pillars of Nahei Bridge a good scrub, transcribing copies of tedious files and dull scriptures, so on and so forth. But just what kind of place was the Red Lotus Pavilion? It was the residence of that bastard, Chu Waning, the accursed den that everyone called Red Lotus Hell. Only a handful of people of Sishong Peak had ever set foot within it. Of the ones who had, every single one had come back with either their arms or legs broken. Thus, in addition to Red Lotus Hell, Chu Waning's residence had another nickname that was even more unpretentious: the Pavilion of Broken Legs. The sect disciples had an inside joke: "The pavilion hides a beauty, the beauty holds Tianwen. Enter through the gate of broken legs and know the agony of getting your legs broken. If you want your meridians busted, look no further than the Yuheng Elder." Once, a fearless female disciple who was outrageously lecherous had actually dared to thirst after the Yuheng Elder's beauty. She had snuck to the southern peak on a moonless night to climb onto the roof, hoping to peek at the elder as he bathed. The outcome was a foregone conclusion. That female warrior had been escorted by Tianwen to the very border of life and death, and had been bedridden for no less than 100 miserable days. Furthermore, Chu Wanning had declared that any further transgressions would be met directly with an eye gouging. You see, what blunt boorishness, what insensitive behavior, what a loathsome man! Within the sect, there had been a number of naive and foolish young girls who, thinking that as girls, the Yuheng elder would pity them and show them compassion, would giggle and tease him, boldly hoping to arouse his attention. However, once the elder butchered that female delinquent, no one had dared attempt to hit on him again. The Yuheng elder was indiscriminate when it came to lashes, having not a scrap of a proper gentleman's disposition. Other than his pretty face, he had nothing to recommend him, or such was the opinion of the sect's disciples. The little messenger Shidi looked at Mo Ran with sympathy in his eyes. He tried to hold back, but in the end, he couldn't. Mo Shishong, The elder Yuheng's temper is so bad that no one who enters the Red Lotus Pavilion comes out standing. Why don't you see if you could say your wounds haven't healed and beg the Yuheng elder to let you wash dishes instead? Mo Ran was eminently grateful for the Shidi's Buddha-like compassion, but he still rejected the idea. Beg Chu Wanning? Please. He didn't want to go another round with Tianwen. Thus, with immense effort, he dressed himself and dragged his heavy feet toward the southern summit of Xisheng Peak, reluctant swaying down his every step. Red Lotus Pavilion, Red Lotus Hell. There was not a single soul in sight for 100 miles around Chu Wanning's residence. No one wanted to stray close to where he lived. Chu Wanning's terrible taste and unpredictable temper made everyone in the sect stay far away, only ever watching him from a respectful distance. Mo Ran remained somewhat nervous. He didn't know what Chu Wanning would make him do as punishment. His thoughts ran wild for the entirety of his journey to the peak of the southern summit. After he crossed through a dense field of bamboo groves, a large expanse of vividly crimson red lotuses came into view. It was yet fairly early in the morning. The sun had only just risen in the east, and it shone with a dazzling gleam on the horizon. From the heavenly lotus pads in the pond grew stalks that connected the crimson blossoms with the fiery red skies. Flower and sky each absorbed and reflected the other to amplify their radiance, until they were legitimately impressive to behold. Upon the pond, a winding zigzag bridge led to a pavilion that stood in quiet elegance. Behind it lay a mountainous backdrop that streamed with curtains of waterfalls. Beads of water tinkled onto the rocks below like shards of crystal, shattering into a watery mist that rose like steam. Light shimmered through the haze, casting an ethereal ambiance amidst the calm. Mo Ran's feeling about all this was, ugh. No matter how beautiful it was, anywhere Chu Wanning lived could only be ugh to him. Look at this excessive lavishness. How wastefully bountiful. The dormitory where the disciples slept was tightly cramped, each room given sparingly little space. Yet look at the Yuheng elder. He was just one person, but he'd taken over an entire mountaintop and had even dug 3 giant ponds to plant an abundance of lotus flowers. All right, okay, so these lotus flowers were said to be of unique strains and could be made into medicines of rare quality, but either way, it was an eyesore. It really was too bad that Mo Ran couldn't just set fire to this pavilion and burn it down. Nevertheless, grousing was nothing more than grousing. Since he was only 16 and powerless to compete with his Shizun, Mo Ran approached Chu Wanning's residence to stand at the front entrance. He curved his eyes into a smile and called out with a disgustingly sweet voice, pretending to be a lonely pleb. This disciple Mo Ran greets Shizun. Come in. The interior of the room was a huge mess. That cold-blooded demon Chu Wanning was dressed all in white, the lapels of his robe crisscrossed high and tight to lend him a chaste, ascetic air. Today his hair was up in a high ponytail, and he was seated on the ground, surrounded by mechanical parts, a pair of black metal gauntlets on his hand, and a brush bitten between his teeth. He sent Mo Ran an expressionless glance and said around the brush in his mouth, "Come here." Mo Ran went over. It was actually a little difficult because there wasn't any space left in the house for a person to walk. Blueprints, pieces of lumber, and metal parts were scattered all over the place. Mo Ran's brows twitched. In his previous life, he had never entered Chu Wanning's rooms. Who could have imagined that a poised, handsome man like him would live in such a mess? It was an honestly indescribable feeling. "Shizun, what are you making?" "The Holy Night Guardian." "Huh?" Chu Wanning was a little grumpy, probably because there was a brush in his mouth that made it inconvenient to talk. "The Holy Night Guardian." Mo Ran glanced mutely at the parts strewn about the floor. This Shizun of his also had the title Chu Zongxi, which wasn't just an empty appellation. Mo Ran had to admit that, to be fair, Chu Wanning was a remarkable man. Whether it was by the merit of his 3 holy weapons, his barrier-repairing powers, or his mechanical engineering skills, he had earned the right to be called the best of the best. This was also why, despite his bad temper and how difficult it was to please him, every major cultivation sect had fought to win him over. As for the Holy Night Guardian, this was something with which the reborn Mo-Ran was more than familiar. It was an automaton of Chu Wanning's invention, cheap in price but tremendously strong and effective in battle. It could protect the common folk in the lower cultivation realm from demonic incursions at night. In Mo-Ran's previous lifetime, the Holy Night Guardian had been something that nearly every household owned. Each set of armor was priced around the same as a broom and was more effective than pictures of door guardians and their open, teeth-bared mouths. Even after Chu Wanning's death, those Holy Night Guardians had continued to protect impoverished families who couldn't afford the services of a cultivator. Such heartfelt compassion, when compared to the indifference with which he treated his disciples, it filled Mo-Ran with contempt. Mo-Ran sat down and looked at the Holy Night Guardian that was currently nothing more than mere parts, even as events of the past drifted through his mind. Unable to resist, he reached out to pick up one of the Guardian's finger joints to examine it. Chu Wanning clicked together the mortise and tenon of the parts in his hands and finally freed himself to take away the brush that had been between his lips. He glared at Mo-Ran. That one was just oiled. No touching. Oh. Mo-Ran put down the finger joint and schooled his thoughts. Still playing the role of someone cute and harmless, he asked with a smile, "Did Shizun summon me here to help?" Said Chu Wanning. "What do you want me to do?" "Clean the house." Mo-Ran's smile froze. He glanced around him at the room, which looked like it had just survived an earthquake. For all that Chu Wanning was a genius when it came to cultivation techniques, he truly was an idiot when it came to everyday life. After cleaning up the 5th teacup that had been shattered but hadn't been swept away, Mo-Ran finally couldn't take it anymore. "Shizun, how long has it been since you last cleaned? Jeez, it's so messy." Chu Wanning was currently looking at a blueprint and didn't look up even when he heard the question. "Around a year." Mo-Ran balked. "And where do you usually sleep?" "What?" That blueprint probably had some problems on it, making Chu Wan more prickly than usual at being interrupted. He ran a hand through his hair and answered irritably, "On the bed, of course." Mo-Ran took a look at the bed, which was piled high with various gadgets and gimmicks that were nearly finished. It was also laden with saws, axes, sickles, and other such tools, each eminently sharp and glinting with a steely light. Unbelievable! How did this person sleep without chopping his own head off? After laboring for over half a day, Mo-Ran had swept up enough sawdust and dirt from the floor to fill 3 dustpans. After wiping down the shelves, more than 10 white rags were now black. By the time noon came around, only half the place had been organized. Fucking Chu Wanning. He really was more vile than a shrew. Cleaning a room was not, at a first glance, a particularly severe punishment. Said out loud, it didn't seem particularly laborious either. However, who could have known this meant sweeping a hellish place that hadn't been cleaned for 365 days? Never mind that Mo-Ran was covered in lash marks. Even if he were in perfect health, a tiresome torture like this could still kill him half dead. Shizun, This pile of clothes had probably been sitting there for 3 months. Chu Wanning finally finished connecting an arm of the Holy Night Guardian. He rubbed his sore shoulders and looked up to glance at the laundry basket, currently piled high as a mountain with ropes. "I'll wash them myself," he said coolly. Mo-Ran let out a sigh of relief. Thank the heavens. Then afterward, a little curious, he asked, Shizun knows how to do laundry?" Chu Wanning glanced at him. After a moment, he replied stiffly, "How hard can it be? Throw it in water, let it soak a bit, then fish it up to lay dry. Done." Really, what would the ladies who secretly admired and crushed on Chu Zongxi think if they knew about this? Mo-Ran wholeheartedly believed that this repulsive and disgusting man was only good for his looks and nothing else. If this came out, how many tender hearts would be broken? "It's getting late. Follow me to the cafeteria and do the rest when we come back." Mungpo Hall was bustling with activity as Sishun Peak disciples gathered to eat in small groups. Chu Wanning placed a few dishes on his wooden tray and went to sit quietly in a corner. Gradually, the seats in the 20-foot radius surrounding him emptied. No one dared to sit near the Yuheng elder, on the off chance that something might upset him and Tianwen would come out for a whipping. Chu Wanning was aware of this but didn't mind in the least. He sat by himself like a cold beauty, partaking of his meal in a refined manner. But it was a little different today. Mo-Ran had come with him and, naturally, had to sit with him too. Everyone was afraid of Chu Wanning, and Mo-Ran was no exception. But having already died once, he wasn't too frightened of Chu Wanning, especially since the dread from their first meeting had faded away, and the loathing he'd felt towards his Shizun in his last life had begun to slowly resurface. So what if Chu Wanning was ferocious? He'd also died once before, and by Mo-Ran's own hands. Mo-Ran sat down facing him, leisurely chewing his sweet and sour ribs. He ate, crunching away, and a small hill of bones soon materialized by his bowl. Chu Wanning slammed down his chopsticks. Mo-Ran blinked. "Can you not smack your lips when you eat?" "I'm chewing on ribs. How do I chew without smacking my lips?" "Then don't eat ribs." "But I like ribs." "Then get lost and go eat elsewhere." As they argued, their voices rose higher and higher. Some disciples started to steal glances at them. Mo-Ran suppressed the urge to flip the bowl of food onto Chu Wanning's head. His lips, gleaming with oil, pursed into a line. After a while, he squinted, the corner of his mouth curving into a sweet smile. "Don't yell so loudly, Shizun. If others hear, won't they make fun of us?" Chu Wanning had always had a thin face, and sure enough, he lowered his voice to mutter, "Scram." Mo-Ran laughed so hard he almost fell over. Silence. Don't glare at me, Shizun. Please eat. I'll try to chew quietly." Having had his fun, Mo-Ran went back to his good and obedient act, and indeed he ate his ribs much less noisily. Chu Wanning was amenable to coaxing, but not coercion. When Mo-Ran did as he was told, his Shizun's expression relaxed a bit, and he no longer looked so bitter and resentful. He lowered his head and continued elegantly eating his meal of vegetables and tofu. This peace didn't last long before Mo-Ran started acting up again. He didn't know why he was doing what he was doing either. What he did know was that every time he saw Chu Wanning in this lifetime, he just wanted to piss him off one way or another. Thus, Chu Wanning noticed that, although Mo-Ran was no longer chewing loudly, he was eating with his hands, his fingers covered in grease, the sauce shiny and dripping. The veins at Chu Wanning's temples bulged angrily as he tried to bear with it. He lowered his gaze, not looking at Mo-Ran, and focused on eating his own food. Maybe it was because Mo-Ran was enjoying the food so much that he got carried away. But after he was done chewing a particular bone, he carelessly tossed it into Chu Wanning's bowl. Chu Wanning glared at the messily gnawed rib, the air around him freezing visibly with frightening speed. "Mo-Ran?" "Shizun." Mo-Ran was slightly terrified, but even he couldn't tell how much of his act was fake and how much was real. I didn't mean to do that." "Yeah, right." Silence. "Don't be mad. I'll pick it out right away." As he said so, Mo-Ran indeed extended his chopsticks and speedily stuck them into Chu Wanning's bowl to retrieve the offending rib bone. Chu Wanning's face went blue, and he looked like he was about to faint from disgust. Mo-Raning's eyelashes shivered, his delicate features looking somewhat pitiful as if he'd been wrong. "Does Shizun find me that repulsive?" Silence. "Shizun, I'm really sorry." "Forget it," Chu Wanning thought to himself. There was no need to argue with those who were younger than him. He abandoned the urge to call forth Tianwen and give Mo-Ran a beating, but his appetite had been wiped out. He stood. "I'm full." That's all you're going to eat? Shizun, you've barely touched your food." "I wasn't hungry," Chu Wanning said dourly. Mo-Ran was internally delighted, but his mouth kept speaking sweet words. "Then I'm not eating any more either. Let us go back to the Red Lotus Pavilion." Chu Wanning's eyes narrowed. "Us?" His gaze was disdainful. "There's no us. Elders and juniors have a hierarchy and distinction. Watch your language." Mo-Ran responded agreeably on the outside, his eyes curved in a smile, clever, obedient, and adorable. But on the inside, he thought, "Elders and juniors, watch my language?" If Chu Wanning only knew what had happened in their previous lifetime, then he would realize that in the end, in this world, only he, Mo Weiyu, was the superior between them. No matter how noble and arrogant Chu Wanning was, how unparalleled, he had ultimately been reduced to a mere speck of mud on the sole of Mo-Ran's boots, living on without purpose only by Mo-Ran's grace. Mo-Ran walked faster to match his Shizun's pace, still smiling brightly. If Shimei was the pure white moonlight of his heart, then Chu Wanning was the piece of fishbone stuck in his throat. He would pull it out and crush it, or swallow it and let it be dissolved by his stomach acid. In this reborn life, he could forgive anyone, but he would absolutely never forgive Chu Wanning. However, it seemed that Chu Wanning had no intention of letting him off easy either. Mo Ran stood before the library of Red Lotus Hell, staring at the 50 bookshelves, each 10 shelves high, and thought that he had surely misheard. Shizun, what did you say? Chu Wanning answered indifferently. Wipe every book in here. Mo Ran had no words. Once you're done, catalog them. Still no words. I will be checking them in the morning. Mo Ran stared. What the hell? Was he going to be stuck in Red Lotus Hell overnight? But he made plans to meet Shimei to get him to change his bandages. Mo Ran opened his mouth to bargain, but Chu Wanning paid him no heed and turned around with a sweep of his sleeves to leave for the machinery workshop. He even closed the door behind him with elegant indifference. Date night summarily dashed. Mo Ran sunk deeply into his feelings of disdain for Chu Wanning. He wanted to burn all of Chu Wanning's books. Wait. The gears in his head turned as he came up with an even more ruinous idea. End of 8.